All right. Thank you all for coming today. I'm Jessica McKinley. I'm the District 13 PTA president and chair of the Social Emotional Learning series for the South Carolina PTA. Our state president, Devan Trigiani, was not able to join us today, but she is here in spirit. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Wes O'Donnell. He is our guest speaker tonight, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jessica. I definitely appreciate it. And thanks for taking the time to join us here tonight. My name is Wes. I'm a journalist. I write for a couple of cybersecurity and military publications. I am a military veteran. I served in both the U.S. Army and the U.S. Air Force for a total of about 10 years of active duty service. And I'm a law student at Western Michigan University because if there's one thing the world needs more of, it's lawyers. And of course, proud father of 3. And in fact, these are my kids right here. Now, I know I said 3 and there's 4 pictured here, but this is my son, Ian, my daughter, Tessa, my oldest daughter, Taylor, who we'll be talking about tonight, and then her boyfriend, this really great kid named Danny. So I grew up in abject poverty in Dallas, Texas. This is a rare photograph of me stoned while simultaneously drunk and living in a tiny frame house in Grapevine, Texas, a little suburb of Dallas. And you can tell how poor we were because of the Soloflex set up in the living room. That's always a dead giveaway. So my mother was a topless dancer and a drug dealer and a drug user, and my father just wasn't around. He left when I was 1 year old. And we were homeless for a while. We lived in cars for a couple of years, and after being exposed to that lifestyle, especially the drug dealing going on in and outside of the house, I was all but guaranteed to kind of fall into that trap where I was going to be experimenting with drugs at some point during my adolescence. And I did just that. I smoked marijuana, tried LSD, acid on 2 occasions. I tried speed, which is what we called it in the 90s. Today it's called meth. And of course, drank myself into oblivion with alcohol. And the people that I was hanging around with at the time played a big role in my drug use. But I don't want to shift responsibility. I don't want to say that they're the reason for the direction that I was heading at the time. And they weren't bad people per se. They just didn't have any direction for life other than when we're going to get high next. So I realized that if I continue along this path, and maybe it's because my brain had matured to a certain point, I don't know what it was, but I woke up one morning and I realized that if I'm going to continue doing this, then I'm going to continue in the footsteps of my parents and live a life of poverty, living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to make ends meet, possibly homeless, possibly working as a pizza delivery driver for the rest of my life. Not that there's anything wrong with pizza delivery. That was a really fun job. But I knew deep down that I was getting too comfortable with this stoner life. I needed to make myself uncomfortable. So my grandfather used to tell me the story about this man walking down the street, and he sees this stray dog lying on a pile of wood. And the dog is moaning and groaning and howling in pain. And the man looks over at this other guy and he says, "Hey, why is this dog lying on this pile of wood, moaning and groaning and howling in pain?" And the guy says, "Oh, him? He's sitting on a nail." And he says, sitting on a nail, well, why doesn't he get up? And the guy says, well, I guess it don't hurt bad enough. So do you know anybody in your life who moans and groans about their place in life, but doesn't get up and do anything about it? Oh man, I hate my job. Why does my life stink? Because they're not uncomfortable enough yet. They become comfortable with that life. So I decided to join the Army infantry shortly after high school. That was my conscious decision to make myself uncomfortable. And the Army was the vaccine for the disease that I was suffering from. Now, the infantry, it's a tough job, but it gave me the discipline that I had been lacking my entire life. It gave me the father figures in the form of older non-commissioned officers that I had been lacking up until that point. And it was essentially like rehab, because you can't drink, you can't smoke, any of that stuff in basic training. So this is me here pictured over in the Middle East. I'm feeling like a high-speed, low-drag, steely-eyed killer is what we used to call ourselves. So I would end up leaving the Army after 6 years and join the Air Force for 4 years to continue my service before I finally left for good. But the one thing that saved my life in the military was having this attention to detail. And it's why I'm alive today. Because on numerous occasions between 1997 and 2007, while I was serving on active duty, I spotted little details that ended up having really big consequences. And attention to detail is why in the military we're told that the little details matter. The little details will save your life. And it's a military philosophy that I want to pass down to you when you're thinking about kids who may be struggling with substance abuse. And that is that details matter. So fast forward to 2016. I'm married with 3 kids. I moved from the great country of Texas to a state called Michigan, where I am right now along the shoreline of beautiful Lake Michigan. And I was offered a job as the executive director of the USS Silverside Submarine Museum in Muskegon, Michigan. By the way, this museum is awesome. They have a fully intact World War II Gato-class submarine that you can spend the night on if you want. So if you're ever in West Michigan, definitely check it out. It's a phenomenal place for kids. So I had this great job running this museum with this national treasure as our crown jewel. And while sitting in my office one day, I get a call from my oldest daughter's Taylor's school, Mona Shores High School. And they say that the Norton Shores police have your daughter in custody here at the school because she was not only smoking marijuana in her car in the parking lot, where the school security cameras could easily see her, but she was distributing it to all of her friends. And one of her friends went and told on her. So my curator at the museum was in my office at the time I got that phone call. And she later told me that as I was on the phone, she saw all the blood drain from my face and I was white as a ghost. And all of my military training, all of my experience, all the life lessons that I had learned living on the street as a kid, my education, all of that went out the window. And the only thing that I could think of was that this girl has just destroyed her life. And then as parents, when our kids are in trouble, we naturally blame ourselves. We start asking, where did I go wrong? What did I not do to stack the deck in her favor so that she wouldn't have the struggles that I had when I was a kid? Because that's what we want for our kids. We want them to have that better life than we had growing up. That's the whole point of having kids, is to continue that legacy into the future. And from my point of view, at this moment in time, she just canceled out everything that her mother and I had sacrificed to get her to that point in life. And we didn't see any signs. We didn't see any details. We didn't see anything that would have prepared us to get this phone call. We were just completely blindsided by this this marijuana issue that Taylor had gotten caught up in. So I told my curator, I said, "You're in charge. I got to go to the school and deal with the personal matter." And I'm walking into the school. I'm steaming hot. Finally get down into the principal's office, and I see my daughter sitting there looking like a dog that somebody's beaten. And I sit down. I'm not saying a word. My daughter's sitting there. She's not saying a word. And the school administrators are not saying a word. And we're all listening to this police officer explain to me how bad of a father I was. And it was during that time that I fully processed what could I have done better? What details did I miss about Taylor that would have informed me of the path that she was on? Now, there are countless articles out there from mental health professionals, substance abuse professionals, who will give you a long list of things to watch out for to tell if your child is using or abusing drugs. But what I'm going to show you tonight are the specific signs that I missed in my situation. And I can promise you this, her two younger siblings, my son Ian and my other daughter Tessa, I'm watching them like a hawk. So these are signs that I missed as a father that I should have caught as a former teen drug user, and I definitely should have caught as a former infantryman, where attention to detail saved my life. So the first one is changes in friends. Now, this is a tough one because kids, and especially teenagers, change their group of peers that they hang out with pretty regularly. If you have a child who just started in the debate club, they're going to meet new people and they're going to start engaging with people that maybe you've never seen before. So it's, for me at least, one of those details that I missed when a new group of people comes up out of the blue that she starts hanging out with, that from my point of view, and by their actions, were not good role models, not good people for her to be around. Famous motivational speaker Les Brown once said, "Show me your friends and I'll show you your future," right? Humans are social animals. We need validation from other human beings around us. Our brains work better when we're around other like-minded human beings. And at the age of Taylor, in her junior year, this was the age where we're kind of feeling out, bouncing ideas off of other people and confirming ideas about who we are at our core. A lot has been said over the years about people that you hang out with. I think there was a study from 2010 that said that your salary is the average of your 5 closest friends, which tells me that I better be hanging around with some rich people. So the bottom line is that we are influenced by people around us, whether it's actively or constructively, whether we know about it or not. And one of the reasons I joined the Army was to get away from the group of people that I was hanging around with as a teenage drug user. And here's the tricky part for a parent. Just because your kids start hanging out with a new group of friends doesn't automatically mean that they're running with a bad crowd. That's where that attention to detail comes in. Where are they going for fun? What are they doing? What do they smell like when they come back in the house? Are their eyes bloodshot? These little details mean nothing by themselves, But when you combine them all together, it might point to a conclusion that the child may need more engagement. So the next one is negative changes in schoolwork or declining grades. Now, I'm not one to talk. My high school experience was a complete disaster. It took me 5 years to graduate, and I only graduated because after dropping out in my junior year, a friend of the family took me in and said, look, Wes, if you really want to join the military, you have to finish school. We're going to let you live in our house while you finish your last year. And to this day, I call her mom, even though she's not my biological mom. I call this friend of the family on Mother's Day every single year and remind her that that one small act of kindness completely changed the direction of my life. So having said that, we as humans and as parents are really good at this little thing called pattern recognition. And if you see a pattern of good grades suddenly get broken, that's something you're going to want to investigate and find out if it's a one-off. Maybe they were just having a bad day. Maybe they didn't study hard enough. Or maybe it's a sign of something deeper. With Taylor, her grades took a nosedive in her junior year. That should have been a big red flag for me that warranted a deeper investigation. And the reason is because her grades took a nosedive in the same year that I dropped out of high school before going back. And Taylor and I, we're a lot alike, probably more alike than she wants to admit. So me knowing who I am, I automatically know who my daughter is. So should have been a big red flag for me to do a little bit more of a deeper investigation. So the next one is overly secretive of their phone. Now this is dangerous territory here because I'm 43 years old and I'm secretive of my phone. Unless it's my spouse, she can look at it whenever she wants. But of course, kids and teens, if they have a cell phone, they're naturally going to be secretive of what they're doing on that cell phone. Looking back, I realized that I was extremely liberal with letting my kids engage with social media and the internet without any parental controls or restrictions at all. And maybe that's because my generation, Generation X, this internet thing is, I mean, it's still new to us. This is amazing stuff. We had a front row seat to technology going from a landline telephone to having this supercomputer in your pocket. So maybe I was too optimistic. Maybe I still believed that this internet was a force for good, where you could produce all of humanity's knowledge right at your fingertips. And I didn't see the dark side of letting the child go wherever she wants to go on the internet. I know now. So here's the thing, with all of these little details that I missed, there's also the fact that it could be something completely harmless. And that's where that parental discretion comes in. A teenager can be extremely secretive of their phone because they're embarrassed of what they're searching for on the internet without actually having done anything wrong. And this is where that engagement comes in. I can tell you this, though. If I would have locked down Taylor's phone with a cavalier approach to parental controls, she would have rebelled even more. Instead, I believe the right move for me would have been to get more engaged in her life and her activities and find out what she's interested in doing with her future so that I could guide her more along that path instead of taking that extreme hands-off approach. So the next one is dramatic shifts in mood that you just can't chalk up to being a teen who's hormonal. This one took me by surprise because one day I have a little girl who's sitting on my lap playing video games and reading books, and the next day, almost overnight, it seems like, She's living in her room 20 hours a day, only coming to the kitchen for food. And when we do see her, she's always angry. I didn't understand where this anger was coming from. That should have been a detail that I should have picked up on because it was not normal for her personality type. But she was my first teenager. For all I knew, this is the time that teenagers do this sort of thing. Maybe they just get angry when they're 16 years old. Having an angry teen isn't a sure sign that they are abusing an illicit substance. But it was one of the warning signs for me that I should have picked up on. And finally, I think this is interesting. According to the Betty Ford Foundation, there are 3 main factors that contribute to the heightened risk for addiction in kids. And I just want to focus on this first one, because for me, this first one really hits home. There is this age-old argument between nature versus nurture. Are our kids a product of their DNA and their genetics, or are they a product of their environment, the way they're raised, what their income or their parents' income level is? So it's a little bit of both, but you can't discount a genetic propensity for addiction that runs in families. I just found out recently that my deceased grandfather, who was a fighter pilot in World War II, an ace, he had 5 kills, was also a heroin user. And his daughter, my mother, was a drug user. My father was an alcoholic who destroyed his liver so thoroughly, he ended up going to Colombia to get a liver transplant so that he could continue to drink. Down to me. And I was, of course, a drug user up until I joined the military. That tells me that I need to pay attention more closely to the dangers in my own family, because that gene for addiction is most certainly there. If you have that family history, it's worth paying attention to. It's worth giving it just a little bit of extra time. So this is the most important slide of the whole night right here. This is it. Just talk to your kid honestly about how drugs can absolutely destroy your life. These things, especially opioids, rewire your brain. They rewire the synapses in your brain. They reduce the amount of pleasure that you get from normal pleasure-seeking activities, where now you only get a dopamine release when you're using that drug. And that's why I like to think of addiction as a disease. It's a disease that can be prevented, and it's a disease that can be treated with the right help and the right intervention and the right engagement. It all starts with talking and getting involved. I'm constantly involved now, and no longer that absentee father. That for me was probably the greatest thing that Taylor has ever done for our family, is slap me across the face and give me that wake-up call, like, we need to be more involved in these kids' lives. And guess what? It's exhausting. It really is. But a parent's job is just that. It's exhausting sometimes, in a good way too, because the reward of having a child to not have to suffer through that drug experience is amazing. And this is Taylor today. She's a college student. She's clean and sober. Even though she is just turned 21, she has no interest in drinking anything at all. And she's with a boy now. I mentioned at the beginning, she's with a boy now for a couple of years who is success-focused, doesn't drink, and he's great for her. And they're both very future-thinking and success-focused now. So my story has a happy ending, but there are a lot of families that don't have happy endings to their stories. Those details that I missed, if even one of those details helps somebody preempt their child from using drugs, then tonight's talk was an absolute success. So thank you very much. I'd be happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Hi. So I don't have a question. I'm more of a statement. But I know that when I was younger and I used to work at a restaurant, and there was this girl that I worked with. As teenagers, everybody goes through that phase. Not everybody, most go through that phase where they're out partying and doing things they probably shouldn't be doing. But she never went out. She never did anything. I remember talking to her, and she said that because she basically raised herself from 6 years old and up. She helped raise her two younger sisters, and she has never ever touched a drug because she saw what her parents went through. So her dad was in prison, and her mom, was a drug addict. So she saw how what it did to her family and to her parents, and especially to her and her little sisters. I guess she kind of learned from her parents' mistake, which is, a good but a bad thing, you know what I mean? But that always stuck with me. And this was maybe 15 years ago that she told me that. And it was just a very brief conversation that we had. And I always thought that was so amazing that, she's, held back and hasn't, even wanted to do anything just because she saw how it affected her family and her parents. And I always thought that was so brave of her, to say no to peer pressure and things like that. So,
Yeah, and my other two children had a front row seat to this whole drama that was unfolding back when Taylor was in high school, and I think that too had an impact on them, and they saw how much pain it put us through as parents. And I can't complain. I have three great kids, just amazing little humans, and hopefully everybody's on the right track.
Yeah, so I'm sure that your kids probably your younger children probably thought the same thing, that they don't want to have to go through what she went through. And you said that you got lucky with being able to join the Air Force, and she got lucky because she was caught early, but others aren't so lucky. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, they don't stop until they're dead. And it's really sad, and it's really kind of a stigma that I think that people don't really realize how such an epidemic this really is.
Right, and it's even trickier now that cannabis has become legalized in a number of states. So what's happening is, kids are looking at it and saying, well, if it's legal in these places, then it can't be that bad for you. It's it's no longer this scheduled controlled substance. Well, it is with the federal government because they haven't changed yet, but at the state level, it kind of makes me wonder if our young people are watching the legalization nationwide happen slowly, state by state, and they're thinking that, well, it's not that bad. But alcohol and nicotine is completely legal as well, and it also could do some damage. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. And in college, I learned that you could die from alcohol withdrawal. You could die from it, and these are severe addicts who are severely addicted to alcohol. And that I didn't really know that you could really die from a withdrawal from something. I just think that is so crazy that, completely blew my mind. So, I mean, it is a hard topic, and I think you are so brave to share your story. And one of our attendees, Jamie, she said, thank you for sharing your story as well. But I think that, the more people talk about these types of things, I think that, because some say, oh, this isn't, they could stop anytime they want. And unfortunately, I don't think it's not like that. Unless you've been through it, which I hope nobody would, but unless you've been through it, you just don't understand. And that's okay, and that might be even a good thing. But but until you've been there, it's kind of hard to, I don't want to say pass judgment, but to kind of say that, oh, they could do this and they could do that, when really it is nothing like that.
Right, right. And I've seen that as well too. Just to piggyback on that last point you made, I've seen alcohol withdrawal will kill you if you stop cold turkey, and that's why getting in early and getting people the help they need in a controlled clinical environment, if needed, is the key. So, and of course, this opioid epidemic that I thought was getting better until the COVID-19 pandemic, and I think the most recent survey, the most recent results that came out, were showing that popping pain pills has skyrocketed while everybody's been stuck at home over the past year. So it's a very unfortunate statistic.
Wow, it is. And those are what scare me, because, a lot of times what happens in these, addiction could affect anybody. So it's not just, underprivileged, families or the poorer communities. Addiction can affect anybody. And a lot of times that's how it starts. Let's say you get into an accident, you break your leg, something like that, you get prescribed painkillers, and then all of a sudden you're addicted to them. And many do get addicted. They may not know it, but they do. Then all of a sudden, I need more. And then they're buying them off the streets, and they get so expensive. And then they, kind of graduate to harder substances. So it happens to everybody. It happens to everyone in all walks of life. I mean, I've seen people, and it just blew my mind that, you never ever would have guessed, really.
Yeah, and I know that feeling. I know that feeling of willing to do anything to get that euphoric sensation of feeling happy and normal again. And in fact, this goes to my military service. If it wasn't for the Army, I probably wouldn't be here right now, which is sort of a weird thing to say. But when people say, "Oh, you're a veteran, thank you for your service, Wes," I have to admit, I feel a little awkward, because the military gave me so much. They saved me, first of all, gave me that self-confidence and that discipline, and then paid for my education. They're paying for law school right now. So I'm not a penny out of pocket. And so when someone says, "Thank you for your service," I feel like the military has given me more than I've ever given it. It just feels like a little gratuitous. I feel awkward. But yeah, it was, I owe a lot to all of the influences I had in the military, and the father figures that it replaced the missing father that I didn't have. So it's all worked out. It's all worked out okay.
Yeah, and that's a really great, story to hear, with a happy ending, and it gives people hope. And I heard you say that, the one person that gave you the kindness that you so desperately needed, that changed your life. And I think that is just so amazing. And you never know who, saying hi to somebody, in passing, you could, change their lives positively, So, but yeah, it's a huge thing. I think that kids are around the abuse, the substance abuse, more now than ever. And that's what we want to do, is try to stop that, or try to educate people so that they know. But I really do appreciate you sharing your story. It's a very interesting story. So, does anybody else have any questions? No? Okay. All right. So, did you want to do you have any contact information if they wanted to maybe contact you? Maybe they don't want to say anything here in front of
Sure,
others.
yeah, not a problem. If anybody has any questions or wants to go into any greater detail in parts of my story and how they translate, I'd love to chat. So let me put my email address in here to the chat, and I welcome anybody to reach out anytime. And that's for Wes O'Donnell.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'll give you guys just a few minutes to maybe write that down if you have any questions. And I know it's hard to sometimes speak in front of other people about touchy subjects. So he said you can email him, and we really appreciate that. That you are helping so many people. And I really do hope to have you come in person sooner rather than later. I think that, that would be a really, really amazing thing that we could do for our community and for especially the state of South Carolina and the PTA.
Yeah, I love travel and I love speaking and I love South Carolina. So you say the word and I'll head out there.
Awesome. So we'll definitely keep in touch then. I have your contact information. So I wanted to thank you all for being here tonight. I hope that, he educated you and changed some of the ways that maybe you're thinking. So if nobody has any questions, I'll go ahead and end the call. I hope you all have a great night, and we are having more webinars very, very soon. So please keep an eye on our South Carolina PTA Facebook page. And Wes, I cannot thank you enough for coming on here. I really appreciate everything.
All right. Well, thank you, Jessica. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, everyone, have a good night.